JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. So the IRS has broke its silence, if you will, related to the employee retention credit. Now, they have come out over the last year warning small business owners against those that are preying on the self-employed and small business owner, possibly misleading them, trying to basically invite business owners to incorrectly get the ERC. So it has created quite a stir in many, many ways. But what the IRS recently came out with is Memorandum 2023-005. I'm going to give you a link to it in the body of this video.
JJ the CPA is here.
And what it really addresses is further interpretation of what we already know from the IRS in prior IRS notices. What they directly, basically further interpret is circumstances in which a business maybe qualifies if they have an issue with their supplier. So they run through 4 scenarios. And in that first scenario, you have a set of circumstances where the business and the supplier do not have a governmental order shutting down that business. Well, if there's no governmental order, no one's going to qualify unless that business has a reduction in gross receipts. I'll talk about that here in a minute. So no government order, no ERC, and no reduction in gross receipts. We don't have ERC eligibility. Scenario 2, they talk about that a supplier does not have governmental orders, but the supplier provided supplies that were critical late, they were delayed, pricing was different. Well, the business is still not going to qualify even though the delays could have been related to COVID. Anything that is outside of a governmental order is not going to qualify that business or that supplier to then create an eligibility for ERC. Bottom line is it's basically the same as scenario 1. Even though there was a delay, a shipping delay, price difference, you name it, there was no governmental order, so no ERC eligibility, unless there's a reduction in gross receipts. Again, I'll talk about that in a second. Also, in scenario 3, the IRS indicates that there's a business and it was shut down due to governmental order in April of 2020. But then that governmental order was lifted in May of 2020. So with great detail, they indicate that yes, that business would be eligible in April of 2020 due to the governmental order, but would not be eligible for any time period after that due to governmental order, in terms of there isn't one after that period of time in April. So in scenario 3, basically what they make clear is, yep, if there's a governmental order, you qualify, but then making it very clear only during that time in which there's a governmental order. So even in scenario 3, they talk about, well, there was an issue with the supplier and delays and it was critical. Well, it didn't matter. There was no governmental order after April. Therefore, it would not be a situation where that employer would be eligible. Then in the last scenario 4, basically you have a situation where you have a business that cannot obtain critical supplies from a supplier. And that then created a situation where the business had to find an alternative supplier. And that alternative supplier, well, it cost more and there were delays. But in scenario 4, that business did not shut down, was not partially or full shut down. So given that many will say, well, if your supplier is affected, you qualify, the IRS is really driving home really how difficult that is for that to be the case. In IRS Notice 21-20, I'll give you a link to it. The IRS goes out of its way to indicate that if a supplier is under governmental order, shutting that supplier down and that supplier is unable to then supply critical supplies to a business, then that business that's not receiving the critical supplies from a supplier that was closed due to governmental order could qualify under the governmental order qualification for ERC, but only during the time in which that business was actually then partially or fully shut down. Just because you have a delay doesn't necessarily qualify you. So with that being said, you've got to look at this very carefully. Basically, if you're qualifying yourself due to a supplier affecting your business, key is that supplier was under a governmental order shutting that business down. The other key is that it would only then be the dates in which the business relying on that supplier was then actually partially or fully shut down. Now, I'd indicated to you that we've been talking here about the qualifications for a business for ERC based on governmental order. There is a second qualifier. Now, it doesn't require both. It's either or. So you can have a business that was never under a governmental order. But if its gross receipts were down, then that is another way in which it can qualify. Now, if you're qualifying due to governmental order, the dates in which you qualify would only be the exact dates of that governmental order in which the business actually did have a partial or full shutdown. If you are qualifying in the second category, which is due to gross receipts being down, well, then you would qualify for the entire quarter in which those gross receipts were down. The requirement is 50% gross receipts being down in any quarter in 2020 compared to 2019. And in 2021, it's any quarter in 21 compared to 2019. And if there's at least a 20% reduction. I'm going to tell you this right now. Stay tuned. I've got a seminar. Check it out because you are able to do ERC yourself. You're out looking for answers. I've got a playlist with all free videos. I've got a link for you to go to an article that I've written. I've got a link in the body of this to go to all of the IRS documentation that the IRS has provided, and I'm going to give you a link to this seminar. So check this out. Got a seminar that you can get instantly, very reasonable, over 3 hours, has a PDF of the PowerPoint that goes along with it, as well as then examples, Excel spreadsheets, flow charts, the links, as well as 2 additional videos on how to prepare the Form 941X, which is what you file with the IRS to actually get your check back. All right, hey, thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you'd subscribe. And then don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me. You have a great one.
American CPA.